a deeply held belief of his that for some reason marijuana is one of the worst things on earth, and that states' rights only apply, I guess, in cases of discriminating against minorities. But look, in this instance, in Michigan and states around the country, the voters have spoken. And medical marijuana, you guys know these numbers, as well as anyone. The national support for medical marijuana is the mid to upper 90% range right now. Is what we need. You're right. We can't have this situation where there's so much uncertainty in a really important field. We need elected officials in office, whether they're Democrats like me or Republicans, who are going to fight for what's right and who are going to stand up for this issue. It shouldn't be a hard call.
I was trying to get these other lawyers to follow me in this like a academic discussion of a constitutional crisis of the likes of, if the federal government, let's say the state goes forward with its regulating medical marijuana, they're giving out licenses to, manufacture, distribute, process, and sell and transport, what they define as a Schedule I drug. The state's doing that, and the states are doing it and selling the Schedule I drug to people for medical purposes. How odd. But nevertheless, and then all of a sudden the federal government says, you know what, we're coming after you, and the Eastern District guy, whatever, just is appointed, they go full force, they bring the DEA in, and they start hammering these places. What is the role of the state at that point? Do they have any? And I'm talking. This is like I'm talking academically. We're talking on a chessboard. Legally, does the state of Michigan, its authority, its attorney general, the police have a legal? The sheriffs. The sheriffs associations. They're the last line of defense against the federal government, right? They're the.
It'll be like alcohol prohibition. The states will go along with.
I know that, but I'm talking about in this fantasy constitutional crisis. I'm talking about. Let's see if he understood my question. If he cares to offer an answer. Did you understand that, Dan?
I think I did. Let me give it my best stab. Right. And when we come into, I think the alcohol introduction there is an interesting one because when we're talking about this regulatory framework, and as you guys know, I was in the hospitality business for about 15 years at the Magic Bag and the Bosco, and I'm very familiar with operating in a highly regulated industry like the liquor business, where the model there is the three-tier system. Michigan is a control state for sales of alcoholic beverages, which means we're one of the most restrictive states in the country, and I would argue in that realm very outdated. And hopefully we don't follow that same model when we're dealing with this new regulatory framework for medical marijuana in Michigan that really just benefits a very small group. With liquor, for example, it's a state-run monopoly, essentially. And hopefully we don't see that same thing happening here. Is it up to individual law enforcement to enforce, the ruling of an attorney general who's overturning the will of the people? It's an interesting point. I've talked to a number of law enforcement officials about their opinions on this, and this goes back, some years. So this would be, getting back to when the '08 referendum was passed, and police chiefs who felt, as the law was, or as the referendum was up for a vote, that it was terrible. They strongly opposed it, and these are folks who met with patients, met with people for whom this made a really big difference, and their opinions changed 180 degrees. So it does becomes interesting. This is not just the assumed old school model of law enforcement will oppose this, because law enforcement understands how important it is for people to have necessary medication.
I find myself times maybe discrediting the police force and their behavior here because I'm always on the client side who have been violated or expected laws to protect them. But at times I check myself because it's really not so much their fault directly because there was no efforts, there's no funding, there's no real attempt to rewire, the way they thought about it when they went about enforcing, marijuana laws in general. I mean, they I could give you tons of examples of the way that they went about this that didn't make any sense, and had they just been given, some real leadership, someone who gave some real leadership and wanted to enforce the will of the people instead of kind of just, vagueness means you ferret it out in court and everyone's a felon kind of stuff. But
yeah.
But that's one of the things that is unfortunate because the police are on the receiving end of that. Had they been given some more direction and leadership and education from the leading law enforcement,
Absolutely.
it would have been different. But let me ask you this, because I know we
Sure.
I have young children too. I think I was looking at your profile on Facebook and whatnot, and your kids are kind of the same age. And I think about, and I find this is kind of like an interesting discussion. It may need like some time to think, but it is, and I like the politicians that are having these discussions and are out, talking about marijuana differently. But the discussion of these topics of marijuana, like how it's going to be explained to your kids and my kids, because when they're 16 and 20, I hope we're still not talking about marijuana the way we are now in schools. You know what I mean? And what about the discussions of with issues of housing and employment? If Colorado still, despite legalization, people could get fired for testing positive at places that. It's legal to smoke and just marijuana as an adult, but you can't have it in your system. You lose your job, and they're federal, company that has jurisdiction at the federal level. So they, federal law applies. There was a Walmart case a while back. There's a lot of areas that really need fixing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But what do you think?
With any change, right? Any change takes time to make things right, and this is a big change. The war on drugs is obviously a failure, and let's take our time and do things right. Make sure we're doing the right thing, so that we aren't in a situation where we've got all these loose ends and where there's uncertainty for folks, whether it's in employment or whether it's in housing. It's important to do things right and to take time and legislate based on fact. And when we operate in the realm of fact and not paranoia and hysteria, we can do great things.
Final question: when you're speaking to, parents of your of your children, or like you happen to be at an event like that, or you have a fundraiser or something like that, and it's probably not the lead topic for you, but are you getting questions about that from a parent standpoint about their kids and marijuana? Is it a topic you're trying to inject into the conversation? And if so, what would be the things you would say? If you were to, on this issue, if some parent at a school assembly, called out and said, I see you on legalization and support that. Well, what about the children? That's always what about the children, Dan? What would you say? What's your response to that?
Think of the children. I'd say I am thinking about the children. I think, we create a much better down the road setup for our kids when we deal with everything in a fact-based manner. Like I was saying, when you create this hysteria around marijuana, the same way that there would be hysteria around alcohol during the Prohibition era, we're not setting our kids up for a realistic system. We're not giving kind of a realistic look. When I think about, I guess another way I might look at it is when you say, what about the children? What about the children of the generation that we lost to the drug war? What about all those kids, especially folks of color who find themselves incarcerated for something that in a couple of years could just be unimaginable that there would be a felony for such instances. So I can understand. Obviously we're not saying let's share this with the children, but we're saying let's be smart the way we legislate, and let's do things that work for all of us. And I get it. I'm not, I'm new to politics on the candidate side, and I get it. And I understand I'm a different type of candidate. I approach things with a different perspective, and certainly in this race, as somebody who's from here, who's deeply invested in this community, who's opened businesses here, who's raising a family here, who's got kids in school here. I get it, and I think I understand a lot of the concerns of the folks in our communities because I'm a part of the community. And so, think about the kids. That's why I'm running. What am I going to say years down the road? What did I do to stand up? What did I do to set an example when things were going so wrong in our communities? And so, I think about the children every day, and that's why I'm doing this.
Dan, what are the important issues that you think that you want to address being a representative, including marijuana, and how do the other issues compare to marijuana in importance?
With the issues compared to marijuana, or you're saying in addition to marijuana? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the full question.
I guess you think there's other things more important than marijuana that you need to address as being a representative, but what are those other issues that you want to address as being a representative?
Sure. So, at a base level, I think before we even get to issues and policy disagreements, and I talk all the time about policy disagreements being good, being important, and that's our path toward good legislation. But at a base level, that we need to have, we need to demand fundamental decency and competence from our government and from our elected officials. Because if we don't have that, and that's just at a minimum, our government can't function. And it can't fulfill its most basic obligations for the people and to protect the people. Then once we've gotten to that point of understanding that we need to have a decent government and a competent government, then we can deal with important issues like education funding, like building an economy that works for all of us, working out health care reform, health care that works for all of us. And there are plenty of important issues in addition to marijuana. But again, I will time and time again go back to the need to, for all of us, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, people who don't care and never pay attention, all of us deserve a government that can function. And that's what we're going to make happen.
All right. Thank you. Great answers. And we appreciate you calling to the show. And I think and I do think, first of all, there's not a lot of people that are this outspoken. We are supposed to supporting Dana Nessel for Attorney General. And as I always joke when I've seen her spoken about, find me another Attorney General that's got a pot leaf on their website because their advisor told them not to. And she believes, and I think you believe, that these are the people. This is an important issue, and I think it's going to bring a lot of people out. And I think there's no reason why people that are speaking out and making this their important issue can't win. I just think it's going to be a year for the taking for the Democrats. I firmly believe that. I think there'll be a lot of voter turnout, and it's a reactionary period because of this crazy last election cycle. So, I think anything can happen.
Look, I think it's important that we not be timid. I think, there's too much timidity in our politics, worrying too much about the polling, worrying too much about possibly saying the wrong thing. And so, it's important that if we believe in something, look, I'm running as me, and that's the way it's going to go, and that's the way that we're going to make a change, and not being timid and saying, look, if I talked to a pollster who said, to stay away from this, don't talk about it, like that's just not the way it's going to go. We're going to do great things by being authentic and working hard for the people.
All right, very well said. Dan, we appreciate you calling in, and maybe we'll have you back on. You let us know how the campaign's going, and we appreciate you. All right, very good, and we will look forward to talking to you, and thanks for calling in tonight. Have a great night.
Thanks so much. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
It's Dan Hartman, candidate running for Michigan's 11th District, and supporter of cannabis reform, legalization, and certainly the right to cannabis medical use. Let's take a quick break. I think in the queue, we're going to try to organize Matt Abel, Brad Forrester, if he's still hanging around, and even Paul Tylinda, as Judge What's-Her-Face calls him, Tylinda. She shouldn't talk to me, that one. Yeah. I hope Paul's listening. Paul, we'll be right back at you. So we'll take a quick break, and you'll listen to Planet Green Trees. Talking Jeff Sessions' 1980s retro.
Just say no.
God, I didn't mean to.
After all.